I'm wondering, have you ever been to the desert? It's a really harsh environment. It's really difficult to live there. But I wonder, have you ever been the desert when it's recently rained and all of the flowers have come out? It's pretty amazing. In the book of the Jewish prophet Isaiah, it talks about the hope of the new world that God's creating. It talks about it as being like wildflowers blossoming in the desert. It talks about a desert being restored to fertile and productive land that can provide food for people. I'm going to share my sermon for the day. The Jewish scripture reading is from Isaiah 35, 1 to 10, and the gospel reading is from Matthew 11, 2 to 11. Feel free to pause the video, have a read of those. Last week we were hearing the first part of John the Baptizer's story. And at that time he was out in the wilderness and he was absolutely on fire. All of these people were coming to him from the city out in the wilderness to turn their lives around and taking his direction. But now he's out of the action. He's in prison in Herod's dungeon, basically. And when he was in the desert, he had said that Jesus was the Messiah. But now in the dungeon, he's doubting whether that is true. Because he knows what's expected of the Messiah, that he's going to defeat the enemies of the Jewish people and set everything right so that the blind can see, the deaf can hear, the lame can walk, the speechless can sing, and the desert becomes productive, feeds everybody. Those are the things that we heard in the scripture from Isaiah. We can feel discouraged when it seems like the world has moved on without us, or the movement that we were part of, the movement that maybe we were a big player in at one time, has gone off in a different direction that we wouldn't have chosen. John is thinking, this isn't the way things are supposed to go. Why am I sitting here in prison? The Messiah is supposed to defeat our enemies, but I've been defeated. There's supposed to be joy for everybody, but I'm in chains. And luckily he has his followers able to visit him. His followers, they bring this question to Jesus, they bring this challenge to Jesus. And Jesus sends those followers back with good news, but not the news that John expects. All these other things that Jesus talks about are signs of God's kingdom as Isaiah imagined it. But those signs, they might still feel like brief little blossoms in a vast and hostile desert. John needs the support of those visitors. At this moment, he can't see any of those flowers that are blooming out in the world. He's shut away from all of that in prison. We need to be supporting each other because some of the time we can see the blossoms and some of the time we can see the bleakness of the desert. We need to be present to each other in the suffering and in the celebration and not forgetting each other in either of those situations. At this time of year, we might feel like we can see reason to celebrate, but we might find it hard. We might find the lack of peace in the world, the lack of justice in the world hard. The isolation from loved ones or the loss of loved ones can make it hard. We need to be a community that can have space for both of those experiences, the experience of joy and celebration and the experience of suffering and grief. We need to be able to be present to each other in what we're experiencing and not forget people when they're not able to be with us. I appreciate what Jesus says about John as John's followers are going, because he could have pitied John or he could have corrected him. He could have said that his cousin John had gotten the Messiah all wrong. He could have lamented how far John has fallen from his wild glory in the desert as a prophet. but he reminds the crowd and he reminds John's followers of John's wild resilience. John can contend with what he's facing and will not bend to the suffering that the king is inflicting on him, because he is like an unbreakable desert tree that grows up strong even where there's not very much water. The conditions are very harsh. Like John in prison, we might also ask the question, was this really the Messiah? Is it real? Because we don't see those signs. We might feel like we don't see those signs. We don't even see those miraculous healings all that much. Those kind of miracles are unusual. They're not our usual experience. We might also find that healing looks different to that, though. I can remember about 12 years ago when I was in hospital for about a month because of my arthritis. There were people who I knew who wanted to come and see me so that they could pray for me, and believed that if we prayed hard enough and believed hard enough, that I'd be healed miraculously. And I appreciated people coming to see me. It helped me keep going while I was away from my community. And when people wanted to come and see me and pray that I'd be miraculously healed, I actually didn't need that. That's not what I needed when people were visiting me. And that wasn't the kind of healing that I needed. Our society says to us that we need to be busy, we need to be productive, we need to have perfect, beautiful, efficient bodies. Our society actually needs healing and liberation from that thinking, because it harms us and it leads us to harm each other. What I did appreciate at that time was being allowed to take the time that I needed to rest and to get the exercise that I needed to recover my strength. And having the time to recognize that the way that I was living was not sustainable. To recognize that God didn't need me to be living in fear and working myself to death, because I was doing that because I felt like I wasn't good enough and I needed to do enough to be worthy of God's love. If those people who had come wanting supernatural healing had listened to what I needed, they would have heard that that was the kind of healing that I needed, and that was the kind of stuff that I needed prayer for. When we're thinking about healing and restoration, we need to make sure that we're listening to what the people we're praying for actually want. So it might mean that we need to make a change so that somebody can be included. It might be our society that needs the healing.